Welcome, everybody. Great to be back with you all. And the larger group is going to catch us on a recording, but it's great to be here as close to in person with all of you who are here as we can right now. Today, we're going to have our third and final session of this series. The session today is called From Prophecy to Practice. And we're going to be looking at certain fundamental, very basic ways of approaching the basic and fundamentals of Jewish practice that are imbued with the prophetic spirit that we've been exploring. So I'm going to pull up our source sheet here. I'm going to drop it in the chat, but I'll be sharing my screen as usual. And similarly to the last sessions, we're going to spend the first chunk of time, a good hour probably, going through the sources, and then afterwards we'll come back in the group forum for discussion and questions and sharing. So I'll ask people for this next section to close your cameras. And please, you're welcome to drop things in the chat. And also make notes for yourself of anything that piques your interest or that you might want to bring up in the discussion section afterwards. And I just want to say that what we were looking at really all in the last two sessions are ways in which the internal state of mind and inner experience is vital to the path of Torah, vital to the connection with Torah, vital to the Torah itself. And part of what we're going to be looking at today are ways in which that inner experience can be directly linked to and tied to the fundamental practices of Judaism. And maybe that's obvious that it should be, but I think in our lived experience, in our communities, and in many of our own personal experiences, it's just not the given. The focus is not on the personal or internal experience. And our religious education, both explicitly and implicitly, tends to disregard that really fundamental element. And oftentimes, we might feel ourselves to be at a lack of language or guidance for how to engage and attune to our own experience in connection with our Jewish practice. These sources today are really just mapping out some possibilities. As I've said previously, this short series is not focused so much on practicing together, on cultivating practice, which is very much the necessary piece for all that we've been learning together. And my hope is that as we're reaching toward the holiday of Shavuot, as we're re-engaging with Torah anew, in a sense, or the reception of Torah, the things we've been learning can offer some guideposts and some pathways that each of us might be able to take in the ways that resonate with ourselves. So the first section of today's learning is going to be focused on prophetic Torah. The second section will be focused on prophetic approaches to prayer, and the third section will be looking at those two things in tandem. And really, Torah and Tefillah, Torah study and prayer, are the most basic pillars of Judaism, of a Jewish way of life. Right? If we think of a Jewish way of life that is engaged with divine relationship, the two fundamental pathways are Torah and Tefillah, and we're not disregarding performance of mitzvot, of the rest of the commandments, which for most of us, actually, that is where we are most actively engaged Jewishly. But on the spiritual front, Torah study and prayer are the main practices. Apart from and together with the rest of the commandments. So that's what we're going to be focusing on here today. A lot of our sources today are going to be from the Piasetzner Rebbe, Rabbi Kalonimus Kalman Shapira, who we studied last week as well. And I believe you'll see time and time again, he just has some of the most developed language addressing some of these issues. So this first piece here is from his work called Mevo HaShe'arim. And what he's really getting at is addressing the question of what does prophecy or prophetic spirit have to do with Torah study, which seems to us, and which in its practice is very much an intellectual endeavor. And it's clear that prophecy is beyond intellectual and it transcends the intellect. So what is exactly that relationship? That's what he's going to be exploring here. And we'll just dive in. He says, it's difficult for us to understand how intellectual apprehension and prophetic revelation work together. And to give you context, he's discussing there this idea that is brought in the Talmud that from the prophetic era, right, the biblical prophets ended at some point in time, and the Talmud says that the Ruach HaKodesh, the Holy Spirit, transitioned from the prophets to the sages, to the Chachamim, the sages of the Talmud, who, as we know, speak of Torah interpretation and legal rulings of halakha, Jewish practice. So he's really addressing the question: what does that intellectual endeavor of the sages have anything to do with Ruach HaKodesh, with the Holy Spirit that is prophetic at its core? So here he goes on. He says, however, let us bring the tiniest bit of an impression of this, right? Of this way in which Ruach HaKodesh, in which prophetic revelation can somehow be connected with the intellectual dimension of our experience. He says, let's bring the tiniest bit of an impression of this through something that's experienced by every student of Torah. And even though it's not the same, or even a glimmer of the experience of revelation that our holy sages experienced through their apprehension, right? We could say that the sages of the Talmud, he's saying, were on a different kind of level in terms of what was going on for them in their engagement with Torah. And nonetheless, each one of us can have some kind of echo of that glimmer that he's about to describe. He says sometimes when a person is deeply analyzing some matter in Torah and is unsure of a specific meaning or intent, right? Somebody's engaged in study and they're trying to understand, and they have questions. It's not quite clear to them yet what exactly is the messages. There are indications pointing in opposite interpretive directions, right? Could mean this, could mean that. Neither can be dismissed. Right? There's proofs for any of those interpretations. Because then a person may sit in silence for an hour or so. As Yoshev domem kisha'at echada. He says, you might just sit there and do nothing. Right, and this isn't only in Torah, right? You might be working at something, trying to crack something, and then some point where you just let it go and you just stop. And then suddenly they say, this is the meaning. My heart tells me this is what it means. He says in Hebrew, Libi omer li kach. So what is this speaking of the heart? Right? What is that transition when my mind can't quite, in an analytical, intellectual way, get to the bottom of something, but then at some point, I stop operating there intellectually, and the heart just tells me it's this. He says, what is this speaking of the heart? It is the sparking of the person's soul as it gazes upon the Torah beyond the proofs and justifications that are revealed to the intellectual mind. Right? He's saying the heart sees Torah directly in a way that the mind doesn't. And by the way, this language of Libi omer li kach, my heart tells us to me, we see this sometimes in the classical commentators. We see this a number of times in Rashi, who is the go-to medieval commentator on Torah as well as Talmud, that there's times when Rashi says, Libi omer li, my heart tells me that this is the meaning. I believe the Ramban, Nachmanides, we see language like that as well. But the Pesach are saying we all experience that from time to time. If we engage in study and trying to understand, there's times when you can't just analytically figure out the direction. Then at some point, the heart knows. He says, additionally, it's brought in the holy books. He says he believes he saw in the Ma'or Einayim that sometimes a person's learning and a feeling arises inside that on this particular verse or this given piece of Talmud, there's some new understanding, what's known in Hebrew a chidush, for them to uncover, a new insight that they need to pull out from there. Yet intellectually, the person still has no idea of what this new insight is, right? It's like I'm learning and there's some word or some verse or some idea, and it just, part of me knows there's more here. There's something I need to discover and uncover here. I don't know at all what it is, but I'm drawn there. But it is only after they feel it inside that they dive more deeply into study. And then eventually that new understanding arises in the intellectual mind, right? The heart was drawn there. And then at some point, as we pursue it, then, finally I can reach that understanding that was hiding behind that intuition. He says that prior inner feeling was a spark of the Holy Spirit, of Ruach HaKodesh. And this means that a spark of the Holy Spirit was revealed to the intellect as well, right? Ultimately, it was revealed to the intellect. If the person had not sought the intellectual understanding after the initial feeling, the Holy Spark would have never been revealed through the intellect. In other words, what the Pesachner is describing here is a way in which our learning of Torah engages that intuitive Ruach HaKodesh that we possess, right? We saw last week that spiritual inheritance of being B'nai Nevi'im, of being not only children of prophets, descendant of prophets, but of being in some way possessing a prophetic spirit, a prophetic intuition, prophetic capacity inside. The Rabbi is saying in our learning of Torah, which we see is taking place a lot with the mind and the intellect, there is that prophetic spirit, that Ruach HaKodesh inside of us that's engaged in that process. And even when the intellect is incorporated, it can be revealing what the inner Ruach HaKodesh, what that internal spark of prophecy was at first communicating to us. But it only was at the level where we got to the intellect that we were able to see it and understand it in a clearer way. And here we'll bring another couple of sources about engaging in Torah from the Pesachner Rabbi. He says, every degree of holiness and true insight in Torah and in avodah and practice all comes from above. In other words, don't think that what you come to understand from Torah or what you touch in holiness is purely something that we ourselves create. It needs to be received. God is the noten haTorah, right? As we say in the blessing before Torah study, Baruch Atah Hashem noten haTorah, or before reading Torah. You are in the present tense. You are giving the Torah. God is the giver of Torah, and a person merely draws it to themselves. And in order to draw a degree of holiness or Torah from above, a person also needs to elevate themselves toward it and receive it. As in, and this is a piyut, a liturgical song that I believe is sung on Simchat Torah, maybe also on Shavuot. Moshe alam amarom, right? Moshe ascended on high and brought down Oz Miftacha, Horid Oz Miftacha. He brought down this dependable strength. It's poetic language for the Torah, the teaching of Torah. But the point here is that in order to draw down Torah, it required an ascent. It required going to where the Torah is coming from, meeting it in order to then draw it in. And if one denigrates themselves, their mind and their spirit, and draws the conclusion that they're just a lowly, insignificant physical creature, then they will remain in lowliness. And it will be impossible for their spirit and mind to be elevated and to receive anything from on high, to draw into themselves. And even if they were to come up with a novel insight in understanding the revealed Torah, what's called a pshat in nigle Torah, right? As if someone understands a Talmudic passage or explains what a certain verse means. Even if a person came to some understanding from that place of feeling, I'm just a lowly creature, I'm not connected to any true level of holiness. When we come up with understandings from that kind of place, he says it's not a true insight. Ein ze chidush amiti. Right? It's just some kind of intellectual thing the person came to. It's not an uncovering of Torah. This is not the case, though, when a person raises themselves in holiness and attaches their awareness to the divine. Then, in the moment of their ascent, they can apprehend some kind of understanding and draw it into themselves. Right? He's talking about a kind of midabeket da'ato b'Hashem. It's a kind of perhaps meditative or ecstatic or even just opening our awareness and consciousness to divine reality. And allowing ourselves to connect with and be attached to, feel a feeling of resonance with divine. He says, then in that moment, there can be some kind of understanding. Again, it's not something we came to through an intellectual exercise, but some kind of realization that we can draw into ourselves, we can absorb. And even when we'll see more about this later on, and even when one studies afterwards, let's say after those moments of dveikut, it could be right. That could be reached through song, through meditation, through dancing, through just awareness. But if when one studies afterwards, let's say later on, I open up a sefer, I open up a holy book, and I'm learning Torah, and the person then needs to work with the intellect to come to an understanding. Then they're not merely understanding with the mind. At that point, it's no longer a merely intellectual exercise. Rather, they drew down the awareness earlier in the moment that they ascended. And now they're bringing it down into their mind and using their intellect to understand that which they had previously apprehended. In other words, what I hear the Rabbi saying is that there are moments of resonance with the sacred. There are moments of inspiration, of a feeling of contact with something beyond, with something of the divine. And those moments, he says, in those moments, we're in a sense downloading divine transmission. We're downloading the teaching, but it's not on an intellectual level. And it could be that later on, I'm using my mind in studying Torah, and I come to an understanding of something. But he's saying, it's not just happening on the intellectual level there. I had, in my moments of connection, of contact, I had drawn into myself some absorbed awareness, divine awareness, that now I'm using my mind to come to a clear intellectual understanding of. I just think there's something so beautiful that he says it in the Hebrew more clearly. Right? Previously, the person had drawn it in, at the time that they had some kind of ascent, some kind of drawing closer to God. And now, the person is drawing it down into the intellect. I just think it's so precise and powerful the way he's saying. We tend to think of intellectual understanding as the height of our development, as the height of the process. But he's saying, actually, it's a yirida. It is a descent. That powerful, perhaps intuitive, perhaps inarticulable experience was something of the marom, something of a higher plane in his language, something of a more elevated state. But for my mind, for the faculties of my intellect to understand it, I need to draw it down. I need to distill it even more. The Kabbalistic idea of tzimtzum, right, of the infinite light of the divine going through almost endless processes of contraction and limitation and becoming more and more bound. When it comes to my mind in the form of understanding, of word, of intellect, it's at a very low, concretized state. And low here isn't a value judgment and an absolute value judgment. The purpose of creation in our spiritual tradition is earthward, is tzimtzum word, is toward that encountering God in the more fine limitations of our experience. But when we get to the intellect, we're bringing down that experience, that awareness that we'd contacted previously. And one last piece in this section, the Rabbi here, Rabbi Zessner, is giving advice of a way to enter into the study of Torah. He says, before one begins to study Torah, right, before you open the book, before you open your minds to it, one should contemplate. There's a kind of preparation he's guiding us in here, that they're preparing to absorb the mind and will of the Blessed One that is in the Torah into their own soul and body. The Kabbalistic teachings say that the Torah is the mind of God, condensed into words and ideas and stories and things that a language that we can understand. It is the awareness of the divine itself contracted and brought into those black letters, those teachings, those ideas, and the will of the divine also enclosed and embedded in Torah. So when I'm entering Torah, I first take a moment to meditate on, I'm coming to absorb the divine awareness and will into my own soul and body, el nafsho v'gufo, the body as well. And if they merit, he says, they will be as is described toward the end of the Tikkunei Zohar. This is just a very dramatic and powerful teaching. Pumach ihu Sinai. Tikkunei Zohar says, your mouth is Sinai. Right? If I truly am bringing divine Torah into my being and my body when I'm studying, so then the words I'm speaking of Torah, my mouth is Sinai. The divine is speaking through my mouth. The sounds and vapors that are emitting from my mouth, right? The sounds and the air, my breath, are those about which it is written, and all the people saw the sounds. And you, the Zohar says, you appear b'diyukna demarach, in the visage of your master. It's very powerful. Your face, you are embodying the face of the divine. At the time of opening, at the time that God opened with the word Anochi, the first word of the revelation at Sinai, the first of the Ten Commandments, opens with the word Anochi, which just means I, or I am. It's the divine I speaking. The Rabbi says if we are truly absorbing Torah into our being and into our body, then when we're learning it, we are Sinai. We are the process of God speaking Torah into the universe through our very body. And how powerfully, he says, will one's entire being be activated by this awareness, to the point at which even the intellectual aspects of Torah will not remain intellectual for a person, as some mere exercise of the intellectual faculties, but they will enter through the entire body and its garments to one's soul, right? This is the garments of the body, both how we appear and our senses and what the expression that comes out of us. It will enter through the entire body and its garments to one's soul, will contact our soul, and will become one with one's soul. Right? That divine awareness, that divine revelation within Torah will unite with our own soul. So these are a few just nuggets, examples of bringing some of that prophetic spirit into the practice of Torah study. And here we'll look at a few sources about prophetic prayer practice. The first source is from the Mishnah in Brachot. The Mishnah says that the early devotees, the Hasidim Harishonim, this Mishnah is speaking about the state from which we enter prayer. And it says that the early devotees would pause for 1 hour and then pray, meaning they would sit and wait. They would meditate for an hour before prayer. In order to align, to attune their hearts to hamakom, to the place. And for those of you who aren't familiar, makom is the Hebrew word for place, and hamakom, the place, is one of the names that the sages use for God, for the divine. There are times when the sages refer to God as hamakom. You might be familiar with this. The Ashkenazi custom at a house of mourning is to leave a house of mourning and say to the mourners, "Hamakom yenachem etchem," right? The place will bring you comfort. And aligning our hearts to the place as the state from which we enter prayer, without getting deeply into it. The place is our entire surrounding reality. Perhaps presence itself, including our own being in presence. It's taking the time to immerse ourselves in awareness of presence as the divine. That place, all-inclusive place, is nothing else but the divine. The divine is the place. Presence itself is the divine. This is the state that the Mishnah is telling us that certain practitioners used to spend an hour entering into before they would pray. And in the Shulchan Aruch, which is the most basic book of codified Jewish law, halacha, and here too is just so important in my eyes for us to bring some of the most fundamental pillars of traditional teaching to just show how these ideas show up here, written by Rabbi Yosef Karo around the year 1500. So he talks about kavanah, about intentionality in prayer and preparation for prayer. And here's what he says. He says, when one prays, they must align their heart with the meaning of the words they utter with their lips, right? In other words, don't sit there just moving our mouths and saying words, But our hearts and intent of the heart and the feeling of the heart should be together with the words and with its meaning. And we are to maintain an awareness, ki'ilu shchina kinegdo, as if the divine presence, the shchina, is before us. Again, this is a more maybe drawn out version of the Hasidim Rishonim, of those devotees who would immerse themselves in place and presence. Here, he's giving perhaps a more popular, something that's more applicable to more people, to imagine. To maintain this awareness that I'm right in front of the divine, I'm standing before the divine. And then there's some Hebrew here that I didn't bring in the English, v'yasir kol ha'machshavot hatordototo, and to then remove all distracting thoughts, until one's awareness and intention are purely aligned with their prayer, right? So it's really this practice of emptying out the thoughts from anything but awareness of divine presence, and then prayer taking place in that space of attuned awareness with the divine. And he says, and this was the practice of the devoted practitioners. They would meditate and pray in a state of focus until they would arrive at hitpashtut hagashmiyut. In Hebrew, English translation is the unraveling of materiality. Hitpashtut hagashmiyut, in a sense, the concrete boundaries of our experience of physical reality would have a loosening, a hitpashtut, perhaps even an untying. And the power of consciousness would increase until they arrived at a state close to prophecy. I'm almost certain that most people who have prayed in a traditional Jewish prayer service don't expect that that's what's happening there, or that that's even perhaps what is possible there. But this is the framework brought in our most authoritative and fundamental book of practice, in terms of the practice that is meant for all of us, which is the first half of what I read here, of entering into kavanah, into a state of intentionality, focus, and quieting of the mind, and an awareness of divine reality, to then pray within that space, and giving the example of this practice itself, the practice of intentional prayer, being on the continuum with the experience of prophecy, right? That the people who would deeply, deeply pray in kavanah would reach this kind of loosening from the confines of physical reality, or of our perception of its confines. If we remember what the Piaseczner taught in the first session we had together, about seeing the world in a way where you're looking at God and God is looking at you. And it's not that physicality ceases to exist, but it's that the earth itself is the expression of divine, and being in resonance with that layer of experience or perception, and reaching a point that's close then to a prophetic experience. I'm going to bring one more piece here from the Piaseczner Rabbi about the kind of quieting practice of prayer. And here he had just in this teaching quoted from that Mishnah that we read about the Hasidim Rishonim, those pious ones who would meditate for an hour. And he says, perhaps this offers us guidance for how one may arrive at a hitorut, an awakening and revelation of the divine portion within oneself that's not through an arousal based on one's needs, and that is even beyond all speech, right? This is, just to bring you context, he's basically saying there, so many of us are accustomed to prayer being about our needs. And when do we really pray? When we really need something, then it really matters to us. And it's not to discount that mode of prayer, but the piece is saying there's another realm of prayer that is something of an entirely different nature, that isn't based on the depth of need that we experience sometimes. And it's even beyond speech, he says. But it's rather by sitting for an hour before prayer, right? That same principle from the Mishnah. For as we said, in truth, there is divinity infusing all aspects of a person's life, right? Nothing in our life is devoid of divine nature. But a person conceals it. We cover over the divine with their thoughts, their wantings, and all of their matters, all of their concerns, and things that keep us busy. But if a person would take an hour to stop and pause the stream of thinking and wanting, the divine portion, right, that divine portion which is within all of the areas of our life, would appear to them below levush, without any garment. It would be completely uncovered. We wouldn't have it enclosed in our concern over this thing or the thing that we're thinking about over here. But those thinkings and wantings that confine the divine that is within all areas of our life would be able to be uncovered and allow for that divine quality that's within all of it, that is the substance of all of it, to be revealed to us. So we've looked at approaching Torah study with a kind of prophetic awareness or consciousness. And when I say prophetic here, we can translate that also to mean as a mode of direct experience with the divine. I don't even like saying the divine. I don't even like the word divine or divinity. It's a little too boxy for me. But I don't, I'm working with familiar terminology in English. But one way of approaching Torah study in a way that is a contact with the being of all being. And one way of engaging in prayer, which is also on that prophetic wavelength, which is bringing that consciousness of I'm here to contact the divine essence that is within all of this, and that prayer being a place to engage in that. What we're now going to look at is two longer sources, and I'm going to give just a few words of preparation here. They're longer. They might be, especially the first sources from Rabbi Nachman of Breslov, and his style is very associative and poetic and not very linear. So they might be a little harder to follow, but I'm going to do my best to read for us to, in a sense, absorb the main idea of the teaching and do my best to explain as well. And I'll also say that my goal is for us to reach this part of the session by the end of the hour, and it could be that we'll go a few minutes past if the sources are taking us a little longer. So here, Torah and prayer, right? The dynamic of those two pillars of our spiritual practice as the dance of divine experience. Here's one teaching from Rabbi Nachman of Breslov on this, and Rabbi Nachman speaks at length and in depth in many of his teachings about the relationship and dual roles of prayer and Torah study, and this is one teaching. And he's speaking here about the phrase in Hebrew, Na'aseh v'nishma, we will do and we will hear. Na'aseh v'nishma is what was spoken by the children of Israel at Mount Sinai. And the rabbis make a very big deal of this, that when God basically says, I have a teaching, I have my teaching to give to you, to transmit to you, that the children of Israel said, we will do, we will do what you ask of us, God, v'nishma, and then we will also hear it, which means we will then understand it. In other words, that the move on behalf of Bnei Israel, the children of Israel, toward God before the Torah was given is, we're in fully. Whatever you're going to tell us, God, we're here to receive and accept and go with. And after we're going with it, we'll also come to understand it, right? We oftentimes do the opposite. Well, tell me what you want to tell me. Let me think about it. Maybe we'll negotiate. Maybe I'll have my own, responses. And then we'll figure out what to do. But here it was flipped. And Na'aseh v'nishma, those we will do, we will listen, or we will do and we will hear. Those are the fundamental components that this teaching is going to be based upon. Rabbi Nachman says, we will do and we will hear correspond to the hidden and revealed realms. We will do refers to the revealed, right? Na'aseh, I can do it. Revealed, it's he says the commandments that each and every person is capable of fulfilling according to their own level. We will do, he says, is the concrete stuff of Torah and of spiritual practice. Light Shabbat candles, wrap tefillin, eat kosher food, give tzedakah. These are very concrete ways in which we can do it. There's some kind of divine transmission, commandment that's saying, here's the practice, and there's ways we know what to do. That's the revealed realm of things. And here too, the revealed realm is not only talking about very concrete actions, but in general, all that's revealed to us in our awareness of this divine relationship. And we will hear, nishma refers to the hidden aspect, that which is beyond a person and hidden from them, which a person isn't capable of translating into practice or service. And I skipped a bit here, but Rabbi Nachman goes on in this piece to say that he gives an example, right? That in the Torah, there are the commandments written in the Torah. But then there's all these words around the commandments. He says, as it says, and God spoke to Moses, right? How many times does the phrase, and God spoke to Moses, show up in the Torah? Hundreds of times. It says, and God spoke to Moses to tell the Jewish people, and then the particulars of the commandments. But he says, that's an example of areas of Torah, parts of the divine transmission that we don't know what to do with. What do you do with? And God spoke to Moses. And I love that that's his example, because in a sense, to me, it's hinting at, what do you do with the very point of contact between the divine and humanity? Those very experiences, that whole realm of experience where there's something here that I'm in touch with, but there is no practical or clear message, understanding, practice, behavior. That's the hidden realm. There's something here that I have no idea how to translate that into practice. And this, he says, it corresponds to Torah and to prayer, Torah and Tefillah. We will do, again, na'aseh, we will do, that's the quality of Torah. It's the revealed. It's that which we know how to act on, right? The Torah is there in words. It communicates to us modes of relating to the divine. And we will hear is synonymous with the hidden, right? That's what he said before. We will hear, that's the hidden realm. It's that which a person does not know how to use to serve the blessed God, which is itself the quality of prayer. Because prayer, he says, is attachment with the divine, dvekut. That is surrender and attachment to the infinite one. That's what prayer is, Rabbi Nachman says. In the sum total of prayer, it's attachment to the infinite one. Because the infinite is something we have no grasp of. And since there are matters that we cannot grasp, they have the quality of prayer, of dvekut, of attachment, of surrender to the infinite, right? Rabbi Nachman saying our whole realm of experience that we really have no idea what it is. We have no idea what to do with. He says that is the realm of prayer. That is akin to prayer. That is contact with the infinite. Because contact with the infinite isn't something, by definition, it's not something that we can condense into something understandable. That's the realm of prayer. What is known, that's the realm of Torah. And each person needs to walk from level to level and realm to realm in order to merit each time a higher degree of na'aseh v'nishma, of we will do and we will hear. So that at each level, the quality of we will hear, right? Those words of Torah that surround the commandments, the quality of God's own Torah. This is something that Rabbi Nachman introduces here, that there's the Torah that's ours, that we understand and comprehend, but then there's the Torah that's God's Torah. The Torah that's the true divine realm that we really have no concept of. The idea here is that na'aseh v'nishma, the revealed and the hidden, work in a kind of layered pattern in which there's a stage at which that which is known to me has a limit at which where it meets that which is not known to me. And when Rabbi Nachman talks about moving from layer to layer, level to level, there's a point at which I immerse more deeply into that which is unknown to me until I reach a place of new understanding. And now that which was unknown is now known to me. That my realm of prayer, right, my realm of attachment to the infinite, ungraspable one, has now become Torah, has now been translated into teaching, into understanding, into a way, absorbed into my life, integrated into my practice. And when that happens, he says, then I I begin to contact a new nishma, right? My naaseh, my Torah, my doing, my comprehension, my understanding, my revealed layer is now at a level that it wasn't before. It was previously unknown, now it's known. And then that births the next unknown layer for me to be in relationship with, the next layer of prayer, of grasping toward the infinite that can't be grasped. I'm just going to skip. And then there will be a higher degree of we will hear, he says. And each time a person will walk from level to level, right? He's describing here this process of almost like a ladder of naaseh and nishma, of hidden becoming revealed, opening a new hidden layer that then becomes revealed, and a new hidden layer then becomes revealed. And he says, person has to walk this path from level to level until they reach the beginning point of creation, which is the beginning of Atzilut. Atzilut is in the Kabbalistic cosmic vision of reality. There's the fundamental teaching of the four worlds, the first of which is called Atzilut, which means nearness or emergence. It's that first place of existence emerging from the infinite divine, of there being an existence that it's near, it's bound to its source, but it already appears as something of its own, or the beginnings of what will become distinct reality. So Rabbi Nachman is saying that we walk this path of unknown and known, of unknown and known, until we reach the beginning point of all creation, until we reach the beginning of Atzilut, that initial seminal place of emergence from the divine. And he says, for there too, in that realm of Atzilut, there is also we will do and we will hear. There is also Naaseh and Nishma. And there, he says, the aspect of we will hear is truly God's Torah. Right? These are pretty far out ideas. We're just taking his words and trying to absorb them on the level that we can. Saying in the realm of Atzilut, in that realm of most primal divine emergence, coming from infinite into some form of existence. The Torah there is not only Torah that is hidden from us, but it is God's own Torah, he says. It is God's own realm. And we see then that there's such thing as God's Torah and God's prayer, right? He's saying the Naaseh and the Nishma of that divine realm is God's Torah and is God's prayer. And when one merits to be absorbed within the infinite, then their Torah, I wrote the wrong there. Their Torah, right? When a person is absorbed within the infinite one, their Torah, that realm of what is revealed to them, what is practiced for them, is truly God's Torah. They're in that sense of closeness with the divine, that their revealed level is expressive of God's own Torah. And their prayer is truly God's prayer. What this means in actuality, I don't know. What this means in practice, I don't know. Who has access to this? I don't know. What I do want to share here is the vision that Rabbi Nachman is laying out for us. A vision of constantly walking a path of Naaseh and Nishma, which is significant in the sense that that's the core of our relationship and a reception of Torah to begin with. It's derived from Naaseh and Nishma. Naaseh and Nishma is our access point to Torah, our access point to receiving divine transmission. And Rabbi Nachman's using that moment at Sinai to lay out an entire map of what the path of practice looks like. And it's that pulsation between that which we have an awareness or understanding of, or are able to be integrated into our practice, and that which is beyond us. And we are in relationship with that which is beyond us, with that which is yet to be absorbed and integrated. And that pulsation between the known and the unknown, between the practice and that which is just beyond our grasp, is the steps of the path that we continue to walk upon, always coming closer and closer to the divine core. As the unknown becomes the known, as that which was on my current level relegated to the divine realm, now it becomes part of my realm when I reach it. But then that divine realm that is beyond me now becomes something yet further. And that's the path in the way that Rabbi Nachman is setting it out. And really, on one level, in a literal sense, I believe for him, resting on the practice of Torah study and of tefillah and of prayer, of engaging with all that we can relate to and absorb in our realm of knowing and understanding, and constantly relating to that surrender to the infinite on the level that we're at. And I believe he's also using these concepts of Torah and tefillah figuratively to speak about our ongoing interaction with that holds and contains both of these elements of the revealed and the hidden, of that which feels present and accessible to us and that which feels beyond us at this moment. It could be a relationship with both of those things. And the next piece that I want us to look at together is the final piece that we'll be learning here. This is also a bit of a long piece from the Piasetzner Rebbe, where he's also speaking about Torah and tefillah, about Torah and prayer, in some ways that echo Rabbi Nachman, in some ways that are different. And here too, we're jumping in the middle of one of his teachings, and his book called Derech HaMelech, teaching on Parshat Ve'era. He says this is the entirety of the Torah learning and prayer of an Ish Yisrael, of a person of Israel. And there's a few teachers, Piasetzner is one of them, Rabbi Nachman is one of them, who tend to use this phrase Ish Yisrael, a person of Israel. And whenever I read those words, what strikes me about it is that it's speaking Yisrael is not just a name of a nation or of a land, but Yisrael is a certain quality of divine relationship, right? When Jacob wrestled with that mysterious figure, that angelic being, and received his name Yisrael, there was, you have struggled with or wrestled with humanity and with the divine, and you can withstand. You've shown that you can withstand that engagement. And Ish Yisrael really is talking about a person who is in touch with that quality of the soul, that quality of the soul that embraces and engages both the humanity and the divinity of reality, and dances that dance and wrestles that wrestle. It's a soul identity. It's a soul quality that can be accessed by anybody, but is not defined by merely being of a nation, but it's a certain quality that we touch. And the practices of Torah and tefillah for a person engaged in that grappling, in that wrestling, he says, min yichud, is a yichud, is a unification. Kol avarotenu, all of our spiritual practice, he says, is process of unification. And he's going to bring a little bit of a philosophical idea from Maimonides to just set the stage for where he wants to go. He says it's known from Maimonides and from the works of the Kabbalists that God is both the knower and that which is known. This is a fundamental teaching of Maimonides that we'll just read it in these words, and then I'll do some translating. For the knowledge that is known to God is also divine. And therefore God is the knower and is the known. And God does not know with any external faculties. Rather, God knows through divine self-knowing. And I'll just try to summarize that concept that Maimonides and some of the other teachers are trying to articulate this whole thing called creation, this whole process called creation, this existence here. Is there God who knows what creation is going to look like and then comes to understand things and goes through that process? And really what all of these teachings are trying to say is that divine awareness undergirds all of what is. And divine awareness fills and sustains all of what is. In the language of the Kabbalists, God is Sovev Kol Almin Umemale Kol Almin, encompassing all of reality and filling all of reality. And that there is no such thing as something external to God's own self. And that the process and development and evolution of reality is a both godly driven process and a process of divine unfolding itself without external entities being involved there. And just to really get into the pieces he wants us to pay attention to here, God as the knower and God as that which is known. And we'll come, those will be the primary pieces of this teaching. Since the light of divine honor, of Kvodo Yitbarach, unfolds and descends into Israel, therefore the knower branches out and is embodied by the people of Israel, and the known is embodied by the Torah. And just what again, beyond the language, what the Pesach is trying to say here is that there comes to be a quality where we seek to know divine reality. In that sense, we are embodying the quality of God known as the knower. And there is a quality of reality which is the object that is known, which is that which we seek to know. And that's the Torah, he says. And the Torah itself is an embodiment of that divine quality called the known. And in truth, they're a single entity, even now, right? The knower and the known. God is the knower, God is the known. They're all in divine unity, even now. But the receivers, meaning us, we are the receivers of divine reality, who exist in the realm of separation. And min haperud, we exist in this realm of at least apparent separateness, cannot receive the unity, such that knower and known would be revealed together within them, right? That ideally, in essence, those different divine qualities of knower and known would be active and alive within us too. That there would be no coming to know God or reality through something outside of ourselves. The knower and the known are unified. But on the realm of separation, the realm of experiential existence in which we live, they're separated. Knower and known. They're separated in order that we can receive them. They themselves, meaning we ourselves, embody the knower, and Torah is the known. These divine qualities of knower and known are separated out into Israel and Torah. It's not to say that the portion of divine consciousness that's within an individual or within the Torah itself is subject to separation, God forbid, but rather even now they're in a state of true unity. But in their embodied state, in a sense, in the realm of experience, the people of Israel can only receive the supernal light through the portion of the knower, right? That position of knower. And the portion of Torah that is descended into this world, which the Midrash teaches merely shards of supernal wisdom. This is a radical Midrash. The Midrash says that Torah is novlot chokhmah elyona. It's novlot is like discarded leaves of the higher wisdom, of divine wisdom. Torah itself is merely a distilled, cast-off version or articulation of true divine wisdom. So it too is in a descended form, and Torah only receives then the portion of the known. And he says, and again, these are to set up for us what he's about to say. This explains, he says, or is responsible for all of Israel's thirst for Torah. Why do we feel a draw toward Torah, a thirst for Torah? The desire for it, the reason that when one doesn't understand something in Torah, they're pained, they feel pain. When it becomes known to them, they rejoice and feel pleasure. The Pesach are saying, well, why does that make any sense? Why would people feel some kind of innate magnetic pull or desire to know Torah? And why would it bother us emotionally when we don't understand something? Or why would we feel a sense of oneg, of pleasure, of delight and bliss when we come to some kind of awareness or realization in it? He says the search and the pain before knowing is like what the Talmud describes as a parable of a person who is searching after something they've lost. As the Talmud teaches, the one who's lost something chases after that which they've lost. And just to give you context of what the Pizasner is really evoking here, the image he's evoking, this is speaking about Adam and Eve, about Adam and Chava, that in the Torah's narrative were one being that was then separated into two, and that Adam in the Torah is telling, or at least in the Talmudic understanding, searches after Chava because she is his lost part. He searches after the part that has been cut off from him. And to just take it out of that very particular form and realm of that initial teaching, the Pizasner is bringing the analogy here of each one of us feeling the lack of that which has been lost from our essential being, and the yearning and desire to recover the wholeness that we feel is missing from us and that we feel is truly ours, that we feel is truly part of us. And he says, that is us searching after Torah. He goes on, he says, the person, right, that person who's feels pain of not reaching that understanding of Torah, who's not whole with what they're seeking. The person is chasing after themselves. Our search for Torah is a pursuit of our own self. And when they come to know, they're filled with pleasure from the yichud, that unification that has taken place, that true coming together as one, like Adam and Eve, it says, V'hayula basar echad. They became a single flesh. After initially being a single flesh, then being separated flesh, two fleshes, and then being brought back together into a single body, reuniting in that initial wholeness. That's what's happening, he says, when we seek out Torah and when we contact it, when we receive it. There's a unification, there's the yichud of recovering the part of our very being that we feel has been dislocated from us, partitioned off. And for this reason, he says, Torah study also requires inspiration from above, so that the portion of the knower shines within a person, right? In a sense, we need that divine quality inside of us, which is called the Yodea, which is the one who thirsts after Torah, which is the one who seeks wholeness. It needs to be awakened. It doesn't work for us to just wake up and, okay, great, I'll learn some Torah, I'll read some books. But for us to truly meet Torah, there needs to be some kind of divine gift for us to have that awakened inside of us. And then that part, right, that knower, what's called the divine knower within us, that part can search after the part of the known. There's that divine within us seeking the divine outside of us, that the divine within us seeking the divine within the Torah that is resonant and coherent with our own divine being. And he goes on, and this is prayer, right? That kind of inspirational dose that we need to receive to engage in this. We receive it from prayer. Why? Because prayer is an illumination and inspiration of light. It's inspiration that is beyond the intellect. And here we're already hearing some echoes, perhaps, or resonances with the teaching from Rabbi Nachman, that Nishma, the hidden, the unknowable, the ineffable realm, is the realm of prayer, is the realm of surrender to the infinite. He says prayer is inspiration beyond the intellect. In Torah, one is touched by light that's drawn into the intellect, through which one becomes a knower who can then apprehend the known that's within the Torah, right? That process that he just described. But in prayer, one is aroused and activated, and there is nothing there that they understand intellectually, right? To feel inspired in prayer, to feel that sense of devotional awakening, there's nothing intellectual about it. I can't point to something that I've understood, and that's why I'm feeling this way. But as we stated before, in truth, they are one, right? As he said earlier, that knower and known are both divine light, are both divine qualities. They're not truly separate. And here too, the light of prayer and the light of Torah, he's saying, are also in truth one. It's just that in prayer, the illumination reaches one's being before separation sets in. And the knower then is not yet separated from the known, right? Those qualities of divine existence, of divine being, have yet to reach the realm of true separation, of division. And so they're experienced as one. In other words, the light that reaches a person in their prayer, they then go and learn afterwards in their Torah study. What I skipped a little bit with the ellipses here, but what the Pisasim is basically saying is that in prayer, my contact with the divine is one that exists in a wholeness, right? It is all-encompassing. It is not limited to the intellect, and it is not articulated in understanding or an intellectual knowing. It's something that suffuses my being. And in that sense, he says, knower and known, these different ways of relating to divine qualities, they're not yet distinct. It's really, it's touching oneness. It's touching a undifferentiated, a yet not yet differentiated form of divine light, of divine contact. And then he says, when it comes to removing myself from that prayer state and entering into engagement with Torah, where I'm now using, not only my intellect, but also my intellect in a more pronounced and acute way to understand something, there I'm now entering into the realm of separation. There I'm entering into the realm of division, of distinction, where there is a knower and a known, where it isn't a wholeness, but it is actually something missing in me that I'm seeking to be fulfilled by, or fulfilled through, or made whole again with. And I just want to read those words again. The light that reaches a person in their prayer, they then learn afterwards in their Torah study. Right? There's a continuum from that undifferentiated download or contact with the divine that I can experience in a prayer-like state, whether literally prayer or a more just some kind of embodied, ecstatic, or just attuned sensitivity to divine reality. When it comes to prayer, I'm now learning that light that I had received there. I'm learning it now in a way of intellectual learning, what I experienced there in a way of immersion. In prayer, a light comes to a person that has not been separated into knower and known. It is light and spark together. They are the knower and they are the known, meaning the quality of light, or perhaps we ourselves in that moment are both knower and known, right? And there's something so beautiful in the way that this is linked to what he described earlier, that Maimonides says, God knows all through God's own self-knowledge. In the realm of prayer, of a more visceral contact with the divine, I know God through my own self-knowing. It is my own inner experience is the place where I'm contacting the divine. Right? But in Torah, I'm here, and somehow God's message is over there, and I'm going to seek it there. And afterwards, he says, that unified, undifferentiated light, it unfolds through one's body and mind, and they understand through their study of Torah that which touched them in their experience of prayer. And the fiery arousal, the hitlahavut of prayer, is then revealed to their intellect through their Torah study. In other words, there was some kind of, again, an unarticulated download of divine light that we receive in those prayer states, that we receive in those deeper states of experience, that then goes through a process of absorption and filtering through the different pathways of my being, my body, and ultimately to my mind. And then when it comes to opening Torah, I'm contacting that same light that I received in prayer in a way that now my intellect is able to hear it and understand it and receive articulation. It's just such a beautiful link where we might think that our own inner experience is one thing, and Torah and books is another thing. And that has nice ideas that other people wrote and said, and this has these experiences that I myself enter into. But what the Rebbe is saying here is that what you get from Torah is none other than your own light. What you receive from Torah is none other than that divine portion that is inherent to your own being and soul, that you are now seeking to contact. And you receive it in prayer and in those kind of states. in a way that is undifferentiated, and we continue to process it and then receive it in a way of understanding, both then in that realm of distinction and separation, where I am the knower and Torah is the knower, and I'm seeking to bridge and fill in that gap in my awareness that the Torah then provides with. And the Torah is giving me an understanding of that light that I received in that deeper state. In that deeper state, I didn't understand it. I felt it through my whole being. And now I then engage in Torah study in a way to receive that degree of understanding. And since within one's intellect, meaning the brain and mind, it's impossible for the knower and the known to be contracted within it, right? That undifferentiated state, it cannot work with and fit into the confines of the intellectual mind. So therefore, they separate. The knower in them, in other words, in us, and the known in the Torah. That transition from whole body, whole being experience into mind or into intellect is a place where that light then becomes distinguished and separated, and I become knower and Torah becomes known, and then we meet through that avenue of connection called Torah study. But the light itself is the same light. And it's the light that I receive in those deeper states that then I absorb intellectually and come to understand through my study of Torah. It's truly an integrative model between what we might call prophetic experience or direct experience with the more boundaried experience of our quote unquote regular human lives, where we are not in an immersive state, where we are experiencing life on the realm of separation, where everything is distinct and our mind and intellect are very engaged in understanding and managing and negotiating the world around us. And Torah is meeting us on that level to tell us about what we received in those deeper states and to allow us to absorb that understanding in that level and that plane of distinction and of separateness. I'd like to invite us back. You can bring your cameras back online. I know there was a whole lot we just worked through there, and we could have spent the whole hour and much more on any one of those pieces. And I'm aware of that. And, talking about tzimtzumim, about contraction, we did some deep contraction there in order to be able to taste some of the light of those teachings. I'd love to just open the floor here for anyone to share anything that's on your mind, on your heart here, anything that touched you, any questions, any thoughts, reflections you'd love to share here. Hold on. There's a whole lot of screens that I don't see now. How do I bring back online? Okay. Hold on. I think there's a way to bring back also people whose cameras aren't on. Whatever, not seeing it. Okay, some people ask questions in the chat. Let's see. Didn't it get exactly the terms known and knower regarding Torah and Tefillah? Okay, that's just for point of clarification. Known and knower in Torah and Tefillah. So it's the model that the PSSner is speaking of there is that in Torah study, we occupy the space of knower, and Torah is the space of known, the quality of known, and we seek and create that yichud, that unification. In prayer, in those deeper states of experience, because you're saying we actually are both knower and known. The content, the divine content is within our own realm of experience, and it's happening at once. And it's not an intellectual knowing. It is a full body, full being, immersive kind of knowing. So knower and known, the divine qualities are received in a wholeness, in a unity, in those more direct experiences. But then when we come out of those experiences and when we engage in Torah, we're occupying those distinct qualities where knower and known are not in an undifferentiated state. The other I hope that was clear. Another question here: can Torah study become prayer? I love that question. Do you want to say something about it? No. Okay. I think so. Rabbi Nachman, who we saw one teaching from here, advised a practice of what he called turning your Torah into tefillah. In a very literal, taken very literally, turning Torah into tefillah for him and his students meant you learn something. It is inspiring. It draws you towards something that you had not realized before. It creates a yearning inside of you for some kind of closeness with the divine. So Rabbi Nachman said, now go pray that. Go translate that learning into yearning. Translate that concept into prayer, into and in a way to embody it. And as we long for it, we begin to belong to it more. It begins to cultivate that space within us to embody that. That's one level of it. But on another level of it, turning your Torah into tefillah can very much be engaging with Torah in a prayerful way, in a way of not only operating from a layer of intellectual understanding and trying to get what it says to me, but in a way of seeking to cleave to the divine, in a way of seeking that kind of attachment with God, in a way of what we saw in the Shulchan Aruch, right? In prayer, see yourself sitting in the divine presence. When we're learning Torah, we can also bring ourselves into the awareness of being in direct contact with the divine presence. And Torah as another expression and an avenue of that. In fact, on Shavuot, we're about to read the narrative of Mount Sinai, of Ma'amad Har Sinai. And at the end of the section of the Ten Commandments, there's a few additional verses. And one of the verses says that God says, "B'kol makom asher azkir et shmi avo elecha u'berachticha." In every place where I mention my name, where I make mention of my name, I will come to you and bless you. Okay, everywhere I mention my name, I'll come to you and bless you. The rabbis learned from that verse that any person, even an individual who is sitting and engaging in Torah study, Shechina kenegdam, that the divine presence is right there with them. That the Torah itself, in every place where that transmission, where that communication is present, God is saying, I will be right there with you. And something that's even more powerful about that read that the rabbis make on those words is when it's said in the Torah, God is speaking in the first person. In every place, asher azkir et shmi, where I make mention of my name. To which the rabbis say, oh, it means if we learn Torah, God is going to be right there. In other words, it seems to be implying that if we are making mention of God's name, if we are the ones engaging in God's Torah, God is saying, I'm going to be speaking my name there with you. There is going to be that meeting of divine presence and your own being. Right? Taking me back to what we saw from the Piazetzner, your mouth is Sinai, the vapors and the breath are the sounds. You are embodying the face of your creator at the moment of speaking Anochi. Right? It's like very far out and powerful dramatic imagery, and yet what our teachers and masters are always trying to teach us is, how do we make these teachings not just beautiful ideas, but how do we relate to them as things that are truly accessible to us on our level of experience? That's my long way to say yes to your question. Anything else? Anything anybody wants to share? Yeah, just open your mic and speak if you want to.
I just want to make sure that no one else does, since I spoke so long last time. So is there anybody else who wants to take space now? No? All right. So in one of my classes years ago, we chanted over and over again, Mamale Kolomi, Visobev Kolomi, Mumi Maladecha Eno Mishu Klu. And so I've been dipping my toes.
Can we translate that? Can we translate?
You fill all worlds, you surround all worlds without, there's nothing but you, basically, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I've been dipping my toe into Gomorrah, which is incredibly difficult for the way God made me and my brain, like really difficult. And I've had the experience of, I'm sitting there going, I can't believe these guys through generations are discussing that little pill pull thing. Like, what are they talking about? And why do they care? And what is this? And why should I care? And this is making me pretty crazy here. And then at some point, I have to let go of my mind because I'm making myself crazy, trying to figure it out. And sometimes in that moment, I feel these rabbis and sages like swimming around my room saying, get it. Do you get this? There's something more, like go beyond these words. I'm trying to tell you something here that's deeper than this little point, than this argument. And I can feel that. And it's like, I just want to like reach up and grab it in, right? Grab it in. But just knowing that helps me show up every week to this class that makes me crazy. And what I thought of as you were teaching, and all this teaching was so beautiful, is that they're trying to help me build up my vessel in the doing of these concrete things so that when the light that I yearn for comes in, it doesn't shatter me, or I can receive more of the light without being shattered like we were at Sinai. And I want to know if that makes any sense.
Sounds like it makes sense. Certainly makes sense for you, right?
Yeah. And I guess I want to plant a seed, and I know what I'm asking on me because I know how busy you are, but I'm going to put this out there.
For those of you who don't know, Sim is my mother-in-law.
Yeah.
Just to make it all clear here.
So I know many of the things that this man is involved in besides teaching us, every now and then, like his crazy life, crazy, wonderful, full. So if there's ever a time when your plate gets a little bit emptied, if you would even consider like doing a 10-month creating an online Aish Kodesh community for us, an ongoing Aish Kodesh community. That's all.
You mean the Piasetzner Rebbe's teachings for group work?
To make an Aish Kodesh, that we could become an Aish Kodesh online community with each other.
I'll drop it in the bucket list.
Wait, what do you say?
To put in the bucket list.
Okay.
That's not a no.
I'm 71. I can't wait for your entire bucket list to empty. So,
I just want to also relate to one thing that you brought up there, which is that the Torah relates on many, many different levels. Right? There is Gemara, there is Halacha, there's Mishnah, there's Tanakh, there's Zohar, there's Chassidut. Right? There are articulations of that divine communication on many, 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 many different levels of being and of awareness. Similarly to the way in which the universe itself is divine expression on every imaginable different layer of being, right? From the farthest stretches of the galaxy and beyond, to the smallest subatomic particles, to people who cut us off in traffic. It's all there. And Torah also gets articulated on all of those levels. So, anything else anyone wants to? Okay, I'm just opening up. How do you reconcile the Torah of your heart with another person's Torah of the heart? Wyatt asked a question here. How do you reconcile the Torah of your heart with another person's Torah of the heart? So something I was thinking about a moment ago and that I'll say here is that there is a blessing that's said when you witness a gathering of 600,000 people or more. I've never had that experience. And 600,000 is is a number, a representative number. It's this sort of some archetypal number of the souls of Israel that stood at Mount Sinai. Right, there were much more than 600,000, but this archetype of the number of souls. So when you see 600,000 people gathered anywhere, there's a blessing to say, and the blessing is Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech Haolam Chacham Harazim, the wise one of secrets, of mysteries. And the Gemara, the Talmud says, the meaning of that blessing is just as the face of every person is distinct from the face of every other one, right? No two faces there are the same. They are all distinct and unique. So too, deotehem shonot zamizo. So too, their opinions, their perspectives, their mind, their awareness is distinct. There are no two that are alike. It's this like wild mystery of existence that as much as we share, there's something of consciousness that is distinctly unique in each and every single person, each and every single creature. That divine consciousness that inhabits all of us does so in its own infinitely unique way within each one of us. So on that we say that God is the Chacham Harazim, the wise one of secrets, of mysteries. Right? That's a mystery, how it is that happens. So Wyatt, you're asking that question about the Torah of the heart. And on one level, no two are the same. On one level, no two hearts are the same. And some of our teachers teach us that true secrets of Torah are not what's written in Kabbalistic books. Secrets of Torah are those deeply embedded knowings and realizations and the knowing of God that each of us carries that can never actually be articulated to another person. We cannot put it into words in a way that can be understood to another. That's a true secret. It can't be told or written just because no writing will do it justice. So there is a degree on which the Torah of each heart is its own Torah, and which each heart is its own Torah scroll. And we find those who have resonance with us. We do have resonance between our hearts. The question of how do you reconcile? Do we need to reconcile? Do they need to find a way to meet? Maybe in some ultimate sense. Maybe that's a bit of a messianic vision, right? That of full reconciliation of all the parts of all of those scattered, distinct and separated shards of divine consciousness here walking this earth, for them to all be reconciled. In a sense, that's pointing to a unity that lies at the source that I don't know if we know the way of how to do that fully. But I do believe that there's a lot of importance and power in finding heart resonance, finding Torah resonance with people, and also there's value and importance in interacting with the hearts who your heart is distinct from and isn't reconcilable with, or doesn't know how to find the way of reconciliation. But that each heart is still valid and each Torah needs to be heard. Right? There is that value of Ezehu Chacham Halomen Mikol Adam, that a wise person is one who has the capacity to learn from every human being. That the Rambam Maimonides, who is one of the smartest dudes to live, said on the Mishnah of Pirkei Avot, Aselech Harav, make a teacher for yourself to go around and learn from everybody. Right? So there is this kind of broadening of the heart that we have the capacity for, and it's an ongoing process and can be a challenge too.
That reminds me, I don't remember the source at all, but there was one teacher who, upon faced with a difficult reconciliation, um, pointed to this idea, Bilibi Chadre Chaderim, that in our hearts we can have many rooms. And I wish I remembered the source, but maybe somebody here knows it.
Mm.
Just that, like that, the capacity of because the heart actually does have several chambers, like 4 chambers or something. So pulling off of that, the idea that the heart can have those spaces, space for this and space for that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And perhaps space for the place where they meet that we don't yet know what's in that room, but we know that there's a room somewhere there.
Absolutely, yes.
Okay.
Wait, so Ami, can I bless you
Yeah.
at this Shavuot? You have the time and the space to open to receive the revelation that you need, that will feed you as you feed all of us.
Amen. Amen.
Amen.
And I'll leave us with a hope here, just carrying a hope for all of us that something of these teachings has met something in the chambers of our hearts, has met some things of the yearnings in our hearts to open, or even to point towards a way to open. And as Moshe said to Pharaoh, when bargaining and negotiating to bring the children of Israel out of Egypt, we're not going to know what we're going to do till we get there. We don't know how we're going to serve God until we reach that place. So I want to bless us to embrace the not knowing that can walk us to Sinai and to receiving, and that in that place of not knowing, to be able to be open to what can be spoken to us, what can be received. Really deep appreciation for you all being here and being part of this process. And this is hopefully the first of many offerings through our Beit Midrash of consciousness, healing, and creativity. And if you want to stay in touch with us at Shefa, you can see us at shefaflow.org. We can continue updating you. You can sign up for a newsletter. We can continue with updates of new things that we're doing. Okay, so thank you all. Chag Sameach. Take care. Bye.